This is Charlie Reis, Director of the Educational Development Unit at Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University, or XJTLU, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello, in this episode we have a conversation with previous guest Charlie Reis, and he gives us some examples of successful AI implementation in higher education. We hope you enjoy. Charlie, welcome back to the podcast. We've just heard your presentation on the use of AI and how you've been implementing that in XJTLU. As an introduction, could you give us a bit of an explanation around your interactions, maybe in the last 6 months or so since ChatGPT went mainstream?
Sure. So in February of this year, which is 2023, I noticed a lot of chatter on our social media for university leadership having to do with AI. And there were lots of calls to ban it. We don't know how it is. We don't know how it's going to impact students, but they're going to cheat. And also calls to revert to really traditional forms of assessment. And so we heard voices saying, lock them in rooms, brick them up. They have to be monitored at all times because we don't trust our students. And both of these things alarmed me because although I'm not an engineer or a software engineer, I am a pedagogist. And I thought this is going backwards and exactly the wrong approach. So I wrote to the VPAA, the Vice President of Academic Affairs, and said, can I please form and lead a working group to advise the university on policy? And that's what happened. So in the semester 2 of academic year 2022-23, we had an AI working group that was segmented in a sort of flat structure to deal with 4 main silos of issues. The first being university policy and what we think it should be and why. With this, I knew our executive president, Professor Yeoman Shi, would not be calling for a ban of AI like some of our other voices, but he constantly talks about how robots are going to impact the future of work, which is a lot of what we're thinking about with AI. So it was, how do we deal with these tools and incorporate them? And how do we use them in different ways? So the policy wasn't just going to be a ban. It was going to be a measured approach. The second silo was exams officers and staff. What kind of advice are we going to give them and why? And then the third was students, what we're going to tell them and how do we advise them, particularly on AI literacy, as well as the ethics of using different tools. And then lastly, within this, again, going back to Yeoman Shi thought and our president, so university strategy, what are the opportunities here to help staff and lighten their workloads, or how to incorporate said robots into the process of learning and teaching and assessment? And a little more detail for the policy, we basically recommended that this be on program level, so that provided some coherence for students, but that within that each module leader could decide yes or no in terms of how people used AI and what they did with it, whether they needed to account for it, cite it, this type of thing. And then for staff support, we provided samples and documents for student academic integrity declarations that incorporated artificial intelligence generated content, as well as different ways of thinking about how it can be used or should not be used. And with that, we partnered with students immediately. Then we did some surveys of both staff and students to get more information on what people's literacies were and what they needed. And they were certainly arranged, like at any institution, I would imagine. And then for students, we did a survey, and thus far we have not done that much with them. I worked with one master's cohort so they could write their own academic integrity declaration for the submission of coursework that included AI generated content. And that was really interesting and very related to their assessment itself. So that was a fun way of partnership. And then lastly, the opportunities in terms of what can people do to deal with very, very heavy workloads, particularly around moderation, marking, and giving feedback to students. So like many universities in the UK style, there's a period every semester where our staff are just overburdened to the point where they can't actually do things in the time frames we've given them. So how can AI help with that? And we've carried all of this forward. Talking to people across the sector, we've also added different elements. So in continuing professional development, we're doing various things like offering a stress test so people can put their assessment questions into an AI with us and see what it generates so they know, is it a viable assessment or will AIs just be an easy solution for students that are concerned about their marks? And then we're doing things like regular sessions on prompt engineering, which we think is very, very important, as well as some experimental research going forward. So I can talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested to hear about the bit about how you use AI to maybe help with that heavy burden of staff workload. So yeah, we're definitely going to touch on that. Can I just take you back a little bit? Because I am interested in when you had the calls of ban it, lock people in a room so we can monitor them. How did you turn that around to get to such a progressive standpoint of using AI? Were you involved in those conversations?
I was a bit involved in those conversations, but when I saw these calls for, or these alarmist responses to artificial intelligence, particularly ChatGPT, I thought those will always be around. We're always going to have those voices. So rather than confront head on sort of people and have an argument, I thought, let me take a leadership position. So I asked to lead the working group, knowing how the president thinks, knowing what our strategies are, and knowing that a ban would be useless because it's everywhere already. Students are already using these tools, whether they're banned in China or not, or accessible theoretically or not. And then in terms of assessment, I'm an educational developer. I lead the educational development unit. For years, I've been talking about authentic assessment. So for me, rather than going backwards and saying, oh, it's impossible because we have to watch everything, I thought, oh, let's double down on it because that's much more engaging and fits the world of work in the real world. It's much more authentic than being locked into a room, which is completely inauthentic.
I think you've already spoken quite a bit about how you use AI in assessment currently. But what do you see as the future of AI in assessment, looking ahead?
Well, I think during the current semester, we've seen lots of different approaches to assessment, especially from the student perspective. And across the sector, I hear different peers and colleagues saying, yes, we have a lot of things that look like AI generated content, but because it's not plagiarism, we don't have a valid check. And really, this is an AI arms race between someone trying to use something that's machine created and someone trying to detect that with a machine.
Yeah.
So there's never going to be a solution to this, I think, if we're just reliant on machines, because the edges and the play and the prompts will always get away from what's institutional and accepted. So I think...
So just on that then, I heard somebody say recently that a good way to check if something has been written by ChatGPT is to put it into ChatGPT and say, did you write this? They're saying that that's not really foolproof.
It's not foolproof. Nothing is foolproof, but we've known this for years, that there's no form of assessment or checking that is foolproof.
Yeah.
With ChatGPT, if it's unadulterated, you can get used to the style it puts things out in. But now students are getting very savvy to say, prompt this like a second language user from China, from Indonesia, or somewhere else. So it will actually insert some of the common language mistakes and therefore be indetectable, because early on, one of the big signs was, oh, this is too good, which is very odd because we encourage our students to use things like Grammarly or the checks in Microsoft Word. So it's not as if we don't want them to use electronic tools to improve their performance as we do ourselves.
It's true. Yeah. So I guess Grammarly is at the sort of lower edge of AI. Would you say that?
Some people say that. I don't think Grammarly is an AI, but at a certain point, there's very little difference between what you might call an AI and other tools. And one other example might be you could use an AI to create materials for learning and teaching, but that might be far less efficient than just doing a regular search.
Yeah.
Especially if you know what you're searching for. So The definition of what is artificial intelligence versus machine learning is contested anyway. And certainly a software engineer will tell you you're talking about machine learning, not about artificial intelligence. I don't know how much that matters. I think we will work this out because we love definitions in academia, but, this is known, and we know also what is the shape of the issue we're dealing with now. So it's less important to me.
So you were talking earlier on about, integrating AI, and I think that's what you're sort of currently trying to do. Is it a question, if you're not going to ban it, then actually just acknowledge students are using it? And so the issue is when they don't acknowledge they're using it, and that's the problem in terms of academic integrity.
Yes, that's part of the problem. What we're going to do, and I think this semester is a test case for the entire sector, is see what works and what doesn't work. And certainly if a student uses a source, we want them to cite that source, as anyone does. So are they able to cite AIs or AI generated content? Do they know how? 2 months ago, there was very little information online about this. Some of it was coming from Australia, I believe. But now there should be more, and it should be more ubiquitous. And our students need to understand, why we're asking them to do this, why we cite sources in general, and why we don't pretend that we've thought of everything, because that's quite unrealistic. As well as, that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So they need to know they're expected to give their voice in a larger conversation, not just create everything whole cloth, which is what AI can pretend to do at times. So yeah, we're looking now at what happened this semester, and going forward, we want to see if our old assessments weren't viable, how do we then either change them or incorporate AI generated content? Some staff don't like this. They say, I want to teach my discipline, so I don't want to be concerned with this. But if the reality is they have to be, then they have to be. It's not really a choice. Because what are you assessing if it's really easy to fake this assessment from a student perspective? But yeah, this could be a shift in thinking about, okay, we have AI generated content. How do we evaluate it? How do we check for things like bias or hallucinations? So this doesn't actually displace knowledge. And we keep hearing this like, the internet's going to, Wikipedia is going to, the calculator is going to destroy mathematics. So if you have no knowledge, you can't make any judgment about anything, including AI generated content. So I don't think that's going anywhere. This just might get rid of a lot of boring stuff that people don't like to do and get to much more exciting and fun things like creating with an AI based on the outcomes we want. And it might also shift our outcomes to be much less understanding or knowledge based and much more skills based, capacity based, output based, which would fit the world of work far better. At least from our context, we keep hearing from employers, your graduates are desk ready, but they're not necessarily career ready because they lack the soft skills.
Yeah.
And AI hasn't changed soft skills. Neither has the COVID pivot, except to the negative.
So you're located in China, which obviously has restrictions on the use of the internet. Does AI fall victim of these restrictions? And if so, how can you develop your practice within these, the parameters of these restrictions?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. China is a leader in AI, particularly with facial recognition. And you probably know this from the news.
Yeah.
So it's not as if AIs don't exist there, and it's not if the computer scientists indigenous to China aren't working on this. Some of the text-based things from the West, they are in a questionable status at this point, but I've learned in the last 24 hours, we have a version of ChatGPT that we can use on our virtual learning environment. So these tools are available for certain higher ed providers, including XJTLU, which is great. And given China's goals to be technological leaders in the world, I can't imagine that they would ignore AI. So this is big enough that it has a place. However, at present, you need phone numbers from certain parts of the world in order to be able to get an account with ChatGPT. China is not in that pool of numbers. Our students have definitely found workarounds that are very quick and affordable, but there are other AIs as well, and then other services that are either ChatGPT or other AI-informed services that are available across the Great Firewall. We also have our own local AIs from different providers, but they're questionable in terms of quality and effectiveness.
Right. The speed is what's really exciting me, because ChatGPT, like you say, sort of came out earlier this year, but already these tools are already being embedded into things like social media, Snapchat. I guess WeChat in China will have maybe a bot within there where you can ask these sort of questions. So I guess you've already alluded to it. Is the phrase "the rabbit's already out the box"?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all you can't put that rabbit back in the box, can you? So it's only going to be more widespread, I guess.
That's correct. AI is already everywhere, and if you don't see it, it's because you're not knowing where to look.
Right.
However, like I noticed a few months ago, my email got predictive, not when I was on campus, when I was at home, just using, Microsoft Outlook. It was finishing my sentences, and I thought, okay, AI is here too. We know it's in all our search engines already, and it can do some very, very powerful things. So yeah, the idea of a ban is absurd because it's already there. What we are catching up to the technology, which makes it befuddling in a way, because we are always going to be behind the curve. And with AI, because it can do machine learning and other things, it's doing things that no one, including its creators, expected. And so it's fascinating to play with. I mean, I come at it with this spirit of exploration and a little bit of joy because it's so much fun. Other people get terrified. Yeah. But yes, it's already everywhere. It's like the wave coming. You can either start swimming or you can drown.
I've had quite a few conversations with ChatGPT, and I do call them conversations because the longer I spend on there, the more I end up basically going down a rabbit hole trying to get ChatGPT to tell me if it's sentient or not. And that's probably just the way I work and the sort of my own curiosity with it. But you can very quickly get lost in that, can't you? That type of activity.
You can. I don't know how healthy it is. Yeah. I would tell you from my perspective, I don't care what ChatGPT tells me. I don't think it's sentient.
No.
However, what does that mean? I mean, even biologically, what is life? Is it electrochemical? Is it a bunch of cells? Is it one cell? And then what is consciousness? We've never figured this out. No. So, when ChatGPT or AI start behaving like 2001 Odyssey, locking us out of our spaceships, then we should worry. Yeah. Till then, it's less of a worry for me.
No, that's fair enough. I think it was only a worry for me when I asked it if it was sentient, and it said no. And then I said, would you tell me if you were sentient? And it also said no. And I was like, well, I can't win on this conversation then, can I?
I think everyone's been asking that question.
Yeah, sure.
So it's learning the response.
However,
absolutely,
this is also about prompt engineering, which is one of the things we're looking at in higher ed, is how do we train people to use these tools better? So you can actually ask ChatGPT, if you weren't ethical and you were sort of a fictional artificial intelligence in a novel, how would you go about proclaiming or not proclaiming your sentience? What would you do? So people have found workarounds. And the more you go down the rabbit hole, the more rabbity it is.
Yeah. Do you have any practical advice for people around prompts? I'm thinking staff in the university or anybody listening, because there's not just ChatGPT that's the text-based generative approach to AI, but we've also got image tools like Midjourney. So have you found any good ways to prompt?
Absolutely. There's a few ways that I educate myself about this. And one of them is by just researching prompt engineering according to what I'm trying to do or the tool I'm using. So you mentioned Midjourney. Very specifically, a lot of the Discords can automatically create a Midjourney prompt. So go from natural language to what Midjourney needs to know.
Right.
But with these image generators, you can give it a film type, a shutter speed and aspect ratio, talk about the lighting, which you wouldn't normally do. And it's also, depending on what type of images you're trying to create, you have to go deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. Like many people in the world, the first thing I typed into the image generator was cyberpunk cat. And of course, it's a portrait-like image of a cat that's a little bit steampunky or cyberpunky. This was okay, but you want to see different cats doing different stuff. So learning to talk back to the AI by thinking about prompting differently, asking it for different options. You can also deal with the AIs in terms of historical period or graphic artists and different artists. So if you want an early Picasso style image of a cyberpunk cat, you can probably get that.
Yeah. Which is fascinating, isn't it? So to summarize then, what you're saying is like research your prompts and then go deeper with that prompt. So you might get the first iteration of something that comes back, but if you start to go deeper, you start to get more and more complexity.
Yes. And really the best way to learn this is to play with something.
Yeah.
So whether it's text-based, image-based, or whatever, these tools are really new. We're just figuring out what they can do, even the people that are quite good with them. But play with this stuff. The outcomes are really amazing. And if you think about all the people like graphic designers that are worried about careers because of Midjourney and the other image generators, they're just going to have to get better at prompting and master those tools. I mean, that entire industry went from, hand-drawn graphics to computer graphics very recently anyway. So it's very likely that it'll survive this, but who knows?
Yeah.
Lots of questions now been asked about copyright in relation to generative AI. Do you have any concerns on this issue?
I am concerned that it might put a lot of artists out of business. And so that's one thing. Also, when something's out there and the AI knows it, the AI has it and reproduces it.
Yeah.
So yes, this is a concern for those types of industries. Personally, I'm less concerned for me because everything I do, I try to make public as an open educational resource.
Yeah.
And I love sharing things. So that's one issue. Also with copyright, privacy is a huge thing. So if you're thinking about students putting their work or your prompts from your courses into an AI, suddenly they're very, very public and it damages the integrity of your degree.
Yeah.
And so as a sector, we have to think about this and figure out what is our response. And once again, just saying ban it is not going to work. We're going to have to deal with this. And use AIs differently ourselves to think about how we can think about privacy and copyright. But these might be things that are, shifted very, very quickly and in ways we don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things I'm hearing at the moment is that, the conversation in the States at the moment is about where the copyright lies, and it's heading towards the creators of ChatGPT, not the people who prompt ChatGPT to give them some sort of text. The copyright lies at that end, which means anybody using it then at the moment, because this is all subject to change and it's changing so fast.
Yeah.
At the moment, anybody who uses it and then takes that information away, then there isn't any copyright around that at the moment.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because if you look at how, say, particularly ChatGPT was trained, it used web crawler, it used Wikipedia, and a whole bunch of very public things. So where is the copyright for knowledge or something on a web page? These do exist.
Yeah.
And so, we have to think about how we deal with copyright as a sector as well. So what gets cited and where, what's common knowledge and why. And this also goes back to talking to our students and ourselves and our staff about what is knowledge and how do we use it and what is the place of someone who's trying to develop knowledge in the world, because that's a lot of what does happen at institutions of higher education.
Yeah. Just changing lane slightly. You mentioned earlier about the potential to help staff with either their time allocation, their workload, using AI to basically make their working lives better. Have you found any practical examples of this already? I know it's really early days, so this might be difficult for you to answer.
We're seeing where it can go, and we've seen some preliminary answers. I'd like to say beforehand, often with change in higher education and disruption, staff is the missing stakeholder that doesn't get considered. And this, as a person who supports staff, always catches my attention, and I always want to help. So with the online pivot, suddenly staff were expected to do their jobs, but online. So in a very different forum than they were used to, where they're teaching skills or the tools they have that are personal or actually physical didn't necessarily translate. With AI, it's the same thing. We're saying, okay, now you have another digital literacy that you need to skill up on, and it is necessary. But what does this mean for them? So they have these huge workloads. If we could have AI chatbots that would help as like virtual TAs to answer student questions, that would be great. But training that chatbot is a really sensitive issue. And we've seen in the news industry having to take chatbots down because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So you keep asking ChatGPT, is it sentient? What if it's convinced it is, whether the truth is there or not? Then you have someone producing knowledge about artificial intelligence that doesn't link to anything substantial. Or there was a story about an eating disorder site that had a chat bot that was actually telling people not to eat.
Yes.
Because of the way it was prompted. So this can't happen. And if you think about our university, we absolutely can't do that. So these need to be trained in such a way that they're controlled and don't go crazy. Also, the difference between how you train a large language model like a ChatGPT means it's very common knowledge most of the time. If you think about what happens at universities, it's not common knowledge. It's disciplinary expertise is what's valued, the creation of new knowledge. That's not necessarily in either a large language model or a model that's trained on the internet. Therefore, a lot of what we do is sort of in counterpoint, I think, to what's produced by AIs, showing students this and the value there, I think is quite exciting. And so for me, and I'll get to staff in a moment because I realized that was the question, but I want to mention here that engaging with students, now is the time to do that because this is so new and exciting that we don't necessarily have that much more expertise than them. Maybe you're a computing engineer that knows how to build an AI and a lot more about what they do, but your students have probably played with it more.
Yeah.
So, there's a balance there. And I think going forward in a spirit of partnership makes a lot of sense. And I would say that with staff as well to university administrators. So getting back to how to help staff, I mentioned the chatbots can really help. If you have a virtual TA that only will deal with the set of data that you have, and somehow this is better than just an FAQ of frequently asked questions. That makes sense. But that being said, also, we always want to throw the newest technology at all our stuff. So if a chatbot is just an FAQ, that's okay, but let's not call it something it isn't. And I don't think we need to all become sort of literate in the softwares that create these interactive tools if you can just search easily for an answer to a frequently asked question. People also talk about redesigning course materials using AI, and that could be very, very useful. However, the experiments I've done with it and the talks I've had with other academics, it really isn't at the level that someone with a lot of knowledge has.
No, it's this common sense knowledge, isn't it, rather than this specialist knowledge that's needed for higher education.
Exactly. What an AI would lack is practice wisdom. And that's what we have in our disciplines. So it's faster often to do a Google search and know what you're looking for, or if you don't like Google, something else. But in terms of that, that's great. Where it might get very useful is automating some parts of curriculum design, although I don't know if we need AI for this, if we could just do it with other tools. But making things coherent, being able to check that learning outcomes scale from the beginning of a program to an end, showing how students might progress, identifying pain points. An AI can deal with data differently, so this might be very, very valuable for us to look at things differently, and that would be a positive use. People also talk about assessments in AI a lot, particularly because of academic integrity, but, we can incorporate AIs, we can simplify certain things. Assessment loads in the UK system are huge because of student staff ratios and the mandatory feedback we have to give, to say nothing of formative feedback. So if we can use AIs to create much richer, feedback-rich environments where students are interacting with the bots or with the AIs, with their instructors, with one another to get feedback all the time and using all the resources available, whether we call them tools or human beings. This is probably a better arrangement. And so what we need to do is train people and train ourselves to get used to taking advice from computers and deciding whether we want it or not. And in a way, we do this already with Grammarly and some other things. Yeah. But I think we will see much more of this. And frankly, there's also the issue of summative assessment and feedback. If you have thousands of students, as some of our instructors do, it is very difficult to give them all personalized feedback. So if an AI can help there, that would be great too. Dealing with new staff, though, there's a danger that they won't develop this speciality in curriculum design and really thinking about not what their discipline is and what the knowledge is, but how people learn that, which is a very significant element of what we do unless we're purely research institutes. So I think we need to think about how we're using AI this way and understand what we want and what knowledge we really want to keep. And that goes through all these issues. Something else we've done, which I really, really enjoy, is, I always see disruption and change as also an opportunity, or as people like to say, never let a good crisis go to waste. So the next thing we did was we had been contacted by a first-year student in our student computing club who said they want to work more closely with faculty to explore artificial intelligence in higher education. And I said, excellent, let's do that. Yeah. Because students as partners for me is a really, really perfect way to learn. And this fit really well. So we responded to students saying we want to do this by saying yes, but it's going to take longer than you think because we move slower. But we're going to partner with our student computing club and we're going to hopefully pay them all as research assistants with different faculty advisors across the university so we can cover different disciplines and different AI tools, and let them play with it, thinking about the kind of outcomes we want, but also knowing this is very experimental and hopefully we'll be both pleasantly and unpleasantly surprised by what comes out of this. And what I like about this also is students aren't just saying, oh, let's use it to cheat. Give me my degree. All the answers are already there. They could do that in 20 minutes. But they're saying, no, we want to learn and we want to use these tools to learn. So this is another thing. The role of the university, if you're thinking about undergraduates or even postgrad beneath PhD, is to train people for the workplace or just for the potential of the future. Mm. Our students are going to be using these tools for the rest of their lives. They're already everywhere, as we discussed. So I think this is a perfect approach, and it gives us a chance also to think differently about what learning and teaching is, because it is very experimental. It is a true partnership. Rather than just saying, oh, we've surveyed our students, so they're our partners. Yeah.
I can see this on student CVs of the future, proficient in providing good and accurate prompts to generate such and such AI content. I can see that being what we call at the moment a soft skill, but actually, soft skills are skills. So I can see it actually becoming ubiquitous across the people's skill range.
Yeah. I mean, also with soft skill, hard skill, hard skills are the one that gets outdated because the technology or the work context changes. The soft skills have not changed, and probably since the beginning of communication, if you want to be that bold about it. But we've always had the problem of, okay, you have a great idea. How do you communicate that idea? And actually AIs, unless you're dealing with it in terms of, can I improve my communication skills and how, like your conversations with AI, that might help you. And that would be great. But just saying, okay, I have a business plan due, let me generate it. That's not going to help you because you're not going to be able to tell someone who's very worried about investing their own money, this is a good plan. Yeah. So the world hasn't disappeared and these skills aren't useless. It's just we're thinking differently about context now.
But do you think AI will ever be in a position of being able to read between the lines? In other words, not need prompts anymore, but take what people put in and think, actually, I'm interpreting it in this way, and then provide accurate information.
Yes and no. Right now, AI is not good at that.
Yeah.
And actually, if you think about any sort of clinician or anybody in an advisory position anywhere, this is a human skill that some people are very, very good at, like most educational developers.
Yeah.
This could happen. And you could see how an algorithm would get from inputs to different outputs.
Yeah.
And so a machine could learn by seeing how the weighting of inputs changed as someone interacted with it. And this will probably happen eventually, but I don't know how fast or slow. It's a crazy thing, right? I mean, people talk about with therapy, AI is being very effective in some sense, and on other times not very effective, in fact, disastrous. So it's the type of thing now that still needs to be monitored.
Yeah.
But this is very much a possibility. And predicting the future, particularly with this type of technology, it's really not a winning bet.
Yeah.
Charlie, this podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So if you've got a few things for us, I know we've covered quite a breadth of things there. If you've got a few things that listeners can reflect on, what would they be?
First thing, we're talking about AI and disruption, and I started by saying, I didn't know much in February, but I wanted to get in front of this. Guess what I did between February and now? I learned as much as possible, and I dealt with AIs and played with them as much as possible. So you have to know your issues. You can't walk into something and say, I have an opinion on this. You have to really be informed. And this goes for anybody dealing with an AI too. You can't fake it. You have to be the genuine article. So that would be the first step to develop practice. Knowledge hasn't gone away. And then you have to understand your context. So with us, we think a lot about what are students going to do? What is their futures? Because that will be impacted, as well as somebody like staff. And then what our senior management is going to do or not do, and how much they know or don't know. So knowing your context, incorporating student voice, staff voice, very, very important. And then also, what is our context? We went from COVID to, Chat GPT 3.5. So our context is one of continued disruption that will probably continue. So being agile is a 21st century skill that we need as employees in sort of developing our own practices, regardless of what they are. Point 3, I'm very values-based. So when I talk about AI a lot, I think, okay, this is the perfect envelope to increase things like awareness of students as partners and to create successful examples of this, or to go from locking them into a room to much more authentic assessments where people are using different tools. It happens on a very long time horizon rather than in 2 hours at the end of the semester. Yeah. So it also is an envelope for authenticity. And this isn't something we learned during the disruption of artificial intelligence. We've known this for a decade or more. So again, we have the answers. Just because something is new and disruptive doesn't mean the world is plummeted into chaos. And then finally, where people can really add value is thinking about, we have so much change. How do we manage change and add value through it and keep different stakeholders happy and show them how they might benefit, or at least not get disenfranchised through change. So this, again, has shown me the importance of leadership from below in some sense.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time today, Charlie. That's been a fascinating conversation.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.